The ugliest of round 16 matches sees France advance, whilst Morocco knock out host nation Canada in America. And Vozinha, the World Cup cult hero and most influential goalkeeper on earth, is now a wanted man in Brazil? This is DMAC Daily. It was a heated match day in the city of Philadelphia and on the pitch. 37 degrees out there today. We got the most ethical of hydration breaks we'll see all tournament. I've never been more grateful for our beloved FIFA president. It was also a carbon copy matchup of the 1998 World Cup round of 16 clash. That fixture saw eventual tournament winners France prevail 1-0 on the day. And 28 years later, it's the same result, same scoreline, with France reaching the quarterfinal stages in what was probably the most spicy contest of the tournament thus far, which really shouldn't have been too much of a surprise. Paraguay didn't necessarily employ the same dark arts tactics against Germany to the degree that they did today, but it is worth noting that France are a vastly superior team to Germany, and so if Paraguay were going to have any chance of spoiling the party, it was going to require something extraordinary. Now, prior to that unlikely victory over the Germans, Paraguay hadn't exactly excelled all tournament. They got completely cooked by the US on match day 1. Then the White Ponies of Turkey did Turkey things and managed to lose to Paraguay, despite the South Americans' own self-destruction that day going down to 10 men. And in the third and final game, we saw the lowest XG matchup of the entire tournament in their riveting 0-0 with the Socceroos. So my expectations of Paraguay today, with all due respect, were quite low, because even though they pulled off the biggest upset in the round of 32, France is a different beast. A beast that had fully lived up to their pre-tournament expectations. Any fear of egos potentially clashing or an inability to gel as a team were quashed pretty quickly, having topped their group with ease, with all their stars cooking, and following that up with a comprehensive beatdown of Sweden. Those poor Swedes, poor Graham Potter, what Elise and Mbappe did to them that day was actually unhinged. Genuinely, that was the best I'd ever seen France play. So yeah, most people recognized that a Paraguay victory was amongst the most unlikely of outcomes, but keeping in mind that football isn't won on paper, and the fact that Cabo Verde almost took out reigning world champions Argentina yesterday, anything can happen in the beautiful game. Or in this case, the ugly game, because that's what this was. Awful conditions, two teams with vastly contradicting styles, one of which was simply trying not to lose as opposed to actively trying to win this game. Like, you thought Paraguay's 4-back defensive approach was egregious stuff, but 5-4-1 Paraguay, this is the final boss of Harambe. Jose Bordalas was definitely impressed today, and Deschamps' France were definitely frustrated, because in that first half, Paraguay's game plan was objectively working. That scintillating front four of Mbappe, Dembele, Olise, and Barcola could not penetrate the brick wall in front of them. All the while, the Paraguay players were actively looking to frustrate France, to get in their heads with tactical fouls at any and every opportunity. And in the second half, very little changed. France just couldn't quite figure out how to unlock the mother of all low block teams. Kone, who came into the side in midfield, almost scored a worldie, but Gil tipped it over the bar. At that point, it wasn't necessarily panic stations for France. I mean, there was only one team here adamant on scoring, but their opponents did look up to the task defensively. The only issue with their ultra defensive game plan was that one mishap and the entire strategy falls apart. And 65 minutes in, Paraguay made a fatal mistake. Desiree Doué, who had only come on for Barcola, perhaps a more intricate player in those tight spaces, cleverly weaved his way between 3 players to generate the contact from Gomez inside the box, who clearly fouls him. Penalty France, an opportunity that World Cup Mbappe was never going to miss. His 7th goal of the tournament. He and Messi are going band for band here. He's also one behind him in terms of all-time leading goals on 19 in 19 games. This man is sick for a World Cup goal. Anyways, from there on out, France continued to dominate without really exposing themselves. You know, Paraguay didn't have the quality to inflict anything of real value towards France. Bar Maurizio's speculative effort late on, they never looked like scoring, although credit to their keeper Gil, who was going beast mode, stopping Mbappe on multiple occasions. But Mbappe wasn't too bothered in the end, actively celebrating in the direction of his rival on the day, which some may say was a little unnecessary. But if you watch this match, let me tell you, Mbappe's actions were fair game, because Paraguay's strategy was diabolical. The antics throughout the course of this were so excessive at times, although, to be honest, I do kind of get it. France are superior in ability in literally every facet. I would say the same thing for their second and third string team. The depth in French football is ridiculous. Paraguay's squad was 1.4 billion euros less valuable than France's, so if they try and take it to them, it's almost certainly going to backfire. Now, people will point out to Cabo Verde's heroics yesterday, but I would argue that that game in isolation is one of the greatest World Cup anomalies we've ever witnessed. Like, I can't still make sense of how Cabo Verde managed to match Argentina for 120 minutes without parking the bus. But regardless, Paraguay's strategy wasn't perceived particularly well by the neutrals. Don't know how they managed to avoid a booking for messing with the penalty spot. It's not often you end up rooting against the underdog, but off the back of today, most people will probably be glad to see France advance. It wasn't vintage Le Bleu, but they largely kept their cool and did exactly what was required to see this game out. Also, defensively, France have made real improvements in their last two outings. For all their attacking exploits, I've been pleasantly surprised by how disciplined their back four is set up. Shout out to Luca Dean too. He's low-key having a really good tournament at left back, and as a collective, I still firmly believe France are the team to beat. They can play you off the park, but they can also dig deep in a physical battle too. Although I will say I was stunned at full time, having realized Paraguay ended this match without a booking as opposed to France's 3. That is legit insane. We head next to Houston, where Morocco became the first nation to reach the quarterfinals in a less than dominant, yet albeit decisive 3-0 victory over Canada. Azzedine Ounahi with a brilliant brace before Sofiane Rahimi delivered the final blow. Personally, my favorite part of Canada v Morocco was when they played the US national anthem beforehand. That really set the stage for what was a historical matchup for both teams. Obviously, Canada had never gone this far at a World Cup previously. They weren't incredible against South Africa, but defensively they looked a lot more assured and fully deserved to advance in the end. But their next African opponents, Morocco, yeah, that's a different ballgame, right? Because we all know of their 2022 exploits, the first African semi-finalists of the tournament. But this World Cup, we've seen that this group is, in my opinion, significantly stronger than that record-breaking team 4 years prior. That team's foundations were built on grit and sheer determination. It's why we all fell in love with their midfield general, Sofiane Amrabat, because at 26, he wasn't exactly a superstar in Europe. He's never been in that category of elite, but his relentless work rate and sacrifice on the pitch played a major role in what they ended up accomplishing. 2026, however, his influence has diminished a fair bit with the rise of the new-gen midfield pairing of Ayoub Bouadi and Neil El Ainaoui, both technically gifted and composed. Bouadi in particular is an anomaly in midfield, 18 years old and dictating the pace like few in world football can. France will be kicking themselves that they couldn't secure his international commitment, because this is a generational talent. Yet it's not just in midfield where Morocco have drastically upgraded. Defensively, they're better in 2026, and the forward line is full of top players. Diaz, El Khanous, Saibari, Talbi, all technically brilliant ballers. We saw the depth of their talent pool on full display in that epic battle against the Dutch, prevailing on penalties. So Canada were always going to be the massive underdog side today, which is why their first half performance was so impressive. Okay, their finishing wasn't quite there at times, Bunu with 2 good saves, but Canada were the ones actively taking it to Morocco, which is all the more impressive considering they were without their best player in midfield alongside their most talented individual in Alphonso Davies. But credit to Morocco, right? They weathered the storm in that first half. Perhaps the fatigue of that intense match against the Dutch and the fact that they had one less day of recovery time impacted them, but their second half showing displayed all the hallmarks of a great team, an elite team, I'd say, because even by their own standards, it wasn't a fantastic performance. They did exactly what they needed to in order to win this game, scoring a beautifully worked set-piece move, Hakimi cutting it back to Ounahi, who finessed it with precision into the bottom right corner. Now, from here on out, this is where it gets interesting and where the qualities of their manager deserve adequate praise, because in the first half, they had all the ball, but had very little control over the contest. But 62 minutes in, they took off Bouadi, their most composed midfield player, and brought Amrabat into the fray. This decision right here was a masterstroke as they reverted to a more counter-attacking style. It was almost almost like calculated suffering, if that makes sense. They knew with every minute that passed, Canada would become more impatient and more exposed. And 81 minutes in, Morocco took full advantage of this. Brahim Diaz picking up the ball on the break, drawing 2 defenders in before laying off to Unahi, who ruthlessly dispatched his second of the day. Just nasty work to crush Canadians' hearts. What a moment for Unahi in particular. Remember, he was their outright flashy midfielder 4 years ago. Many predicted he would take Europe by storm in the years to come, and whilst his club career has been slightly disappointing, every time this lad puts on a Morocco shirt, he's legit unreal. He almost got his 3rd goal involvement of the day, setting up substitute Rahimi, whose effort hit the crossbar, but he'd eventually get his goal laid on. Another counter-attack instigated by Diaz, with the number 9 putting this game to bed. 3-0, job done, on to the quarterfinals they go. Yeah, it wasn't their best showing today, but great teams win games when they're not at their best. I said after the Netherlands game where they dominated, Morocco are a different proposition now on the world stage. The dark horse days are over. This is a heavyweight nation in 2026, one that will fully back themselves against France in 5 days' time. The only real negative to today was Saibari's injury. I think that's a wrap for his tournament, which is a big loss considering he is their talisman. As for Canada, what a success this tournament has been for Canadian football in general. Now, the naysayers will point to the fact that they only won against the woeful Qatar team and South Africa, but in all 5 games Canada played, their identity was clear for all to see. They don't simply revert to pragmatism. Even against Switzerland and Morocco, both of those games, Canada finished with more shots, higher XG, and I know, games aren't won on XG, but this is what I mean when I say identity. That even against superior opposition, their philosophy is built on a fearless pursuit to try and outplay their opponents. Something that I fully respect. Don't get me wrong, I understand that conservative tactics aren't inherently wrong. Just ask Morocco in that second half, but Canada are a developing football nation that is striving to be better. And I think a guy like Jesse Marsch deserves some praise for that. Yes, his full-time comments were a little cringe, a bit overly emotional, dare I say delusional. But let me tell you right now, I'd rather that kind of delusion as opposed to my country's head coach that plays anti-football all tournament, exits embarrassingly, and then says that, quote, "We showed the world Australian football is strong." So congrats to Canada. I think it's been a great tournament for you guys. We head next to transfer news now, because somehow the craziest story of the World Cup has just gotten even crazier. Just a few weeks ago, Vozinha was an out-of-contract 40-year-old goalkeeper that had been playing in Portugal's 2nd division. Fast forward to today, and he's now the most followed goalkeeper on social media, and in the midst of a transfer battle in Brazil. This script is truly like no other, but if for whatever reason you missed out on his jaw-dropping rise, if you just so happen to live under a rock, well, it all started in Cabo Verde's World Cup opener against Spain, where Vozinha produced one of the greatest goalkeeping performances of the tournament. Cabo Verde were facing one of the favorites, a team packed with world-class players, and somehow walked away with a 0-0 draw. Vozinha made 7 saves that day, was named man of the match, and by the final whistle, he was in tears, which is understandable. It was such a surreal thing to witness live. Before that game, he had around 56,000 Instagram followers. After it, he exploded to more than 14 million. That is basically the football internet choosing a new main character overnight. Tim Payne must have been fuming, but what made the story even better is that Vozinha didn't just have one heroic performance and disappear. Cabo Verde then continued their ridiculous tournament, drawing with Uruguay, then Saudi Arabia to qualify for the knockouts unbeaten in their first ever World Cup campaign. Then came Argentina, and even though Cabo Verde were eventually beaten 3-2 by the defending champions on the day, Vozinha somehow walked out of that game with his reputation even bigger. He made 8 saves against Argentina, kept Cabo Verde alive for as long as possible, and by the end of the match, Unk had well and truly solidified his World Cup cult hero status. Which brings us to chapter 3 now, because according to reports by Brazilian football journalist Marcelo Braga, Vozinha is now being targeted by 2 Brazilian clubs in Avaí and Atlético Goianense, with the veteran goalkeeper readily available having just left Chaves. And while in normal circumstances signing a 40-year-old goalkeeper from Portugal's 2nd division would sound like a very short-term move, this is obviously not a normal circumstance, because with Vozinha, you're not just signing a goalkeeper, right? You're signing the story of the World Cup. You're signing a man with newfound global attention and a fan base that has grown faster than any player at this World Cup or any person on the planet, period. Now, Braga's reports have since been corroborated by Fabrizio Romano, only amplifying his hype further. So for a Brazilian club, especially one looking for more global recognition, this is a no-brainer from a marketing perspective. But even on the pitch, he has just proven that he can perform amongst the world's best. I just can't help but feel captivated by Vozinha's story. You know, Spain made him viral, Argentina made him this legendary figure, and now Brazil might be where the next chapter starts. For now, the teams really keen on him are based in the second tier of Brazil, but I wouldn't be surprised if he got an even bigger move. I mean, we've already seen A-League veteran Tim Payne go from the obscurity of Wellington to a South American giant in Paraguay's Olympia, so why not give Vozinha similar treatment? He deserves a big move. And now for some rapid fire transfer news to close out the show, starting with Man City, who have won the race to Leicester City's wonder kid Jeremy Monga for £12.5 million, beating Arsenal to the prize 16-year-old signature. Speaking of Arsenal, and they're also set to see Leandro Trossard depart the club imminently, moving to Besiktas for €20 million. A decent pickup for Turkish football off the back of a great season at the Emirates. Meanwhile, Man City bid farewell to Nathan Ake in a £7 million switch to Fenerbahce. We also saw another sizable transfer overnight in the Prem, Tyreek George permanently departing Chelsea for Everton in a £24 million deal. Fabrizio Romano is also reporting that Chelsea ought to look elsewhere for a central midfielder, as Granit Xhaka isn't available for any price. One player that is available for free is Riyad Mahrez, having now departed Al Ahly off the back of a decent World Cup campaign. I'm curious as to what's next for the 35-year-old. It's also confirmed that Ter Stegen is heading to Ajax on a season-long loan to link up with the manager who was at the helm during his most recent loan spell at Girona. Is this going to be Ter Stegen's redemption arc? We'll just have to wait and see. Anyways, guys, that's all for today's DMAC Daily. Appreciate you tuning in, and I'll see you tomorrow.